Hello, hello, hello. Today I'm talking with Dallas Jackson. We talked about being authentic, dealing with a new long distance relation during COVID, and how to treat failing as a learning experience. I'm Ivano from Who's Agile. My pronouns are he and him. Welcome to my channel. You see a lot of agilists around me on this screen. If you want to hear me interviewing, please click that subscribe button because these are the people that I've invited so far. If you think I'm missing people, let me know in the comments. And that like button, well, if you liked today's interview, don't forget to click it. Hello everyone, and hello Dallas. I think Dallas Jackson that's how I should pronounce your name, is that correct?
Yes.
And just for the people to show us a little bit on where we are, this is Google Earth that shows my house in Ghent in Belgium, and we're moving all across the globe, completely to the opposite in Auckland, if I'm correct.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm coming to you from the future. It's about 18 or so hours before the US and about 12 or so hours in front of you.
Yes, because at my time it's Sunday evening, so 9 o'clock 33 minutes, something like that. And what's the time on your side?
It is 9:33 a.m. on Monday.
On Monday. So really from the future, I'm calling out to the
Yeah.
future. Uh,
If I get the lottery numbers, I will let you guys know for sure.
that might be interesting. Um, that's already a very interesting thing. But tell us, for the people that don't know you, tell us a little bit. Who are you?
It's always one of the hardest questions, right? Because it's where who are you in whatever kind of situation that you're in. Um, but I think my broad answer is I am the mother of two teenagers. I am a wife, and I'm a sister and a mother, and probably fourth or fifth or sixth on that list. I'm a transformation coach and agile trainer, um, which is probably why you want to talk to me. So, um, yeah, I started as a kind of just a low man or woman on the totem pole, and almost 15, 16 years ago, found this thing called agility. Um, and I thought it was kind of the best thing since sliced bread. It was like whatever question I had, I could find an answer to it in agility, or agility would show it to me. So we kind of started it in on a team I was on. I was a team member and fell in love with it and became the first scrum master of that organization, and then the first team coach, and then the first enterprise coach, and then kind of executive enterprise coach at the end of my tenure um, at an
Wow.
organization called Whole Foods Market. And so um, I have this. I feel really lucky to be able to say that I've seen success at all those layers, and also made maybe not the best choices, and I've kind of seen the dumpster fires that happen and the mistakes that happen. So I think uh, it's a really cool experience to be able to share the really good bits, and also the bits that are like, hey, already made that mistake for you, stay very far away. Because I think sometimes we talk about the really good bits and the really amazing bits, particularly on platforms like this. But I love to share the stories about when it didn't work, because it never works all the time, and so
Mm.
it's so cool to just bring light to those dark areas, and maybe encourage people to do that as well, so that we can all learn from each other's mistakes instead of making the same mistake over and over and over again.
Yeah, I think that's really an interesting thing. At the same time, I've noticed some years ago I wanted to do a talk about the biggest 10 mistakes or whatever. And I realized for myself it was kind of hard because it would become very clear what customers that were, and I didn't want to talk negative about customers. How do you deal with that in these kind of situations?
Change the names to protect the innocent. No, I'm kidding. I actually think that it's, what I find a lot of the times is if I'm talking about an organization or about a team or something, most of the times when I share experiences, people are like, "Oh yeah, I know what team that is," and it's completely different and completely separate and distinct. So it even I think that the more we bring it to light, like these mistakes and these stumbles, the more people feel like they're not alone and they see that their mistakes um, are legitimate or their struggles are legitimate, right? Because I think as agilists, I think one of our, something that we're, or I feel I am, is kind of an internal or an eternal optimist, because whatever mistake was made or whatever stumble or um, just like big old like dumpster fire, whatever that is, I think as agilist, something that's in us innately is what can we learn from this so that the next time it's not the worst. And so even when we're talking about things that don't go well, I think there's an optimistic nature about agile coaches and trainers to learn from that, which I think is amazing and wonderful. And also just to honor the fact that we didn't get it right. Like, we are humans, and humans are messy creatures, um, and we learn from that, absolutely. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt a little bit. Sometimes it doesn't set us back a little bit. Sometimes it doesn't, make us feel a little less than. And so just being able to voice it, I think, is really, really important. This is really interesting. This is not at all how I thought I would introduce myself, but here you go.
Yeah, that I have the tendency to ask some extra questions. Um,
Excellent.
and I want to go back actually to a little bit what you said earlier. You said, okay, I'm all these different kind of roles, and then the last role is the agile coach, which is what we're going to talk about. And that's the
Mhm.
same thing for me. A lot of what we're talking about today is much more about the person behind the role and everything. And of course, we're always talking about agile one way or another. But I've noticed that with many people, yeah, the some of the stories of our lives are actually why we think that way. And I think this is, in that sense, a nice introduction, because talking about our failures and about the problems is at the core for many of us, like you stated already. So that's, in that sense, it is part of a real logical introduction, but indeed probably not the nicely prepared one
Probably
that we
not.
thought about. But thanks already for sharing, because I think it's a core aspect that it is not always easy, but yet it is very, very important. I want to move to that very first question. What is something that people usually don't know about you, but has influenced you in who you are?
Ooh. Um, it's a really good question, and the way I just answered is having some sort of influence on, instead of the answer that I was coming up with. It's open some different pathways. Um, I think something that's influenced who I am that may surprise or may not surprise people, but I grew up in Texas, and I was kind of free child labor for my dad. He owned a construction company, um, and you know, growing up, it didn't. It, my dad, was very successful. Kind of later in life, and we had bits of um, bouts of uh, maybe not the easiest life. But I remember being on his work site and knowing what work was, like knowing what effort was, and knowing that he told me that whatever the problem was in front of you, um, there was a way to solve it. And it could look incredibly different. So, if we didn't have the specific tools, he would be like, "Well, you better figure it out. Like that's your problem, kind of not mine." And I think that the older I get and the more I go into situations where it may not be tools and, you know, framing or plumbing or anything like that, I take what I take that tenacity that he taught me and those problem solving skills, um, kind of just throughout my life. And I think sh- being around his work ethic, and being around this idea that whatever the problem is, we have the tools. The tools may look different for everyone. Um, really has influenced the way that I do my work, right? So instead of power tools now, I have frameworks and methods and things like that. And I think that it's the same. Like, I've really leaned into it because if I take a framework and apply it and you take one and apply it, it looks completely different. I think that's that's the beautiful part of it because we're taking the context, we're taking who we are as people, and the framework. And I think frameworks and methods and whatever tools we have as agile coaches are super powered when we take into consideration our background, our biology, our biography, because it makes those tools real and it makes them feel authentic. Um, I remember 15 years ago, um, my like someone I'm really, really lucky to have still in my life, Richard Lawrence, um, was kind of the first agile coach I had ever been exposed to. And I remember trying to emulate him, like just copy paste what he was doing. And I was like, that's what makes a good coach. That's like, he said these 5 words in this order. So I have to say those 5 words in that order. And I'm going to be awesome. And I tried it and it came off terrible. Like it wasn't authentic. Um, it wasn't natural to me because, um, Richard Lawrence, amazing and wonderful, but different background, different skill set, different human. And so it wasn't until I was able to, with his help, right? I wasn't able to say that these frameworks are the tool, but how you apply them is what makes you an agile coach. And I think, yeah, so yeah, I think my working, having to problem solve on a job site when I was little probably influences me much more than I ever realized.
And I want to. uh, you said something really interesting also in the beginning there when you said, okay, your father kind of stimulated of doing it and solving it on your own. But I kind of also hear that puts the bar very high. Like, okay, you have to figure it out. Or did I hear something that you didn't say?
No, no, you had to figure it out. I remember going into a room one time and I was helping my dad and he said, "All right, this floor needs to be grouted." I think I was like 12 or 13. And
Wow.
one, I was like, no idea, like no freaking clue how to do this. Um, two, I uh he has very high standards, so there's always that like parental thing. And three, there was literally a bag of grout, a bucket, and that was it. And I was like, I don't really know how to do this. And he's like, well, there's the bag, there's the instructions. Um, try something and let me know what doesn't work. And it's so it's so scary. And that's I think innately that's what we try to do. We live in this world where we don't know what we don't know, and it's just becoming more pervasive that we don't know what we don't know. And so trying something and then learning from it and asking questions, I think is as simplistic as what, inspection and adaption is. And so it was drilled into me young. Like, if there's not a way, you create a way. If you can't find a way, you create a way. And
And
yeah,
that you learned at before the age of 12, because the
yeah,
example you give now was at 12. I assume it's not the first time that
oh,
he
yeah,
came. Yeah, so that's. I think it's wonderful because, like you say, we don't know what we don't know. Learning how to deal with uncertainty, I think, is a very hard thing, and for many people, it takes a lifetime to deal with that. I think. Well, I have the feeling that during Corona, the people who have an agile background were kind of able to deal with it a little bit better in the sense that we were used to having unknown things and focusing on
yeah,
long term. I'm not saying it was easy, but still, we know that there was no easy answer. And I think that's a little bit what you've learned very young already. That's a little bit what I'm hearing. So I can definitely see how that influenced you. And the way you explain it, it also sounds like your father really did that on purpose with you. Is that, or did that just by accident, or you really
I
know if
think
that was, yeah?
I think that's how he grew up, um, bootstrapping things together, and that's just how his mind worked or still works. Um, and even now, we're presented with a problem, and it's, well, what can you do to learn more, versus, sometimes you don't know the solution. Um, and I think that it's I in this conversation, I'm just realizing how fortunate and lucky I am to have grown up with that mindset. Now, I mean, I love my dad. It was not always delivered in like the most pleasant way. Like, sometimes it was very short and hey Dallas, we're, time is money kind of thing. Um, but yeah, just I have this overwhelming sense of gratitude for the work ethic that that he instilled, and the, there where there's a will, there's a way. I think if I had to sum it up in a sentence, would be,
Mhm.
my dad's influence on me.
Mm. That's really, yeah, it's already very wonderful story, that's, yeah, that brings probably a lot of memories back to you, but it also shows a lot like, okay, this is a really cool way to learn. And at the same time, I think it might be, as a young girl, been very frightened for you because you were always kind of pushed to, okay, figure things out. But and I think a lot of, as a parents, we sometimes try to go in the complete opposite way, solving all the problems for our children. And yeah, I kind of understand your father in that sense, that it doesn't help you, but because then later in life they are much more dependent on you as a parent, and you were taught the complete opposite way.
Yeah.
So that's
But but it's interesting that you say that, because what's coming up for me is, whenever I have a problem, or when, I have an incredibly close family, and so if if I do have something, going to my dad and my mom and my sister, um, is natural. It's like, okay, this is what I've tried. What am I not seeing? And it's always it, you know, my it's really funny. My dad and my sister always ask, well, what have you tried so far? Or what have you done? And so it just feels innately in kind of the DNA of our family that we're going to try something and then go forward. But it's really interesting. We've been through some hard things as a family, but despair has never felt like the go-to emotion. It's always that
Mm.
tenacious, that tenacity, and all right, cool. It didn't work today. We'll just try up, wake up tomorrow and try again. Right? Like it's never failure. It's always
It's
going one
just
step
one
further.
step. Yeah, one step that might have been failed. That path might have ended, but there are other paths or there's other ways to
Yeah,
try. Yeah. And I like it really, like you say, okay, it's not just you it or your father, it's also the rest of your family. Like, okay, what did you try? So you have now a kind of network in your family of people that can help you out with some of these things. So
mhm.
that's really really cool, kind of. And yeah, I really like it, and at the same time, I think it's probably not that common. For people to do it that way. But that's exactly why this is a really great answer to that very first question, because that might yeah not many people might know this. Let's move to that second question. If you had not been doing what you've been doing now, do you have any idea what would have become of you?
I am a classically trained chef. So
Wow.
I would be cooking, and I mean I do anyway for my family and friends, and um, but I think that something with food, something to nourish people. I think coaching hopefully helps nourish people's soul and work environment, and I think that I would probably just do that with food.
And so, how did you move from a trained cook? How do you end up in agile or in IT in general?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I wish I had a better answer, but I didn't want to be poor at that moment, and people, just be real
It's
honest.
a very realistic answer. It's yeah, yeah, it is important. I mean that, and it also shows a little bit about everything you said earlier on. You need to take care of problems, and if money becomes a problem at some point, yeah, you look for
Yeah,
somewhere else where you can make sure that that's no longer a problem.
yeah. I've always had an interest in technology, and you know, I had I was a solo mom, um, until my son was 13 or so. So it was him and me, and um, it's a kitchen is a hard place to make enough money to kind of give your children what you think that they should have. And so I thought about what could I do to leave room to be able to hone in that skill and practice, and even if it was at my house, at my own home. Um, and then what could I do that I knew that I was good at? And I knew I had done some technology projects. I had done a lot of foray into that area. I was like, I can do this. Like I can advocate. I can advocate for what people need, and I'm really good at solving problems. And that was an industry that I felt at the time was those two things were incredibly necessary. So I took some kind of taught myself how to do some stuff, and um, yeah, my first role in that was a business analyst at a Whole Foods Market, and I learned so much there, so much there. Um, and quite honestly, it's not that different from cooking, right? Like different people have different tastes. You have to make things palatable for everyone, but it's not going to be everyone's favorite thing. And when you can modify or personalize for them. This person wants a little more spicy food. This person doesn't want salt. This person, and it's the same sometimes when we deal with stakeholders, right? They have their personal preferences for a reason, and so it really reminded me like going through um, business anal being a business analyst and figuring out what the problems were and then working with developers and testers on the solutions. It really was kind of like creating a recipe. It's like, all right, like these, this accountant does not, they don't want any extra steps. They don't want any extra screens. They want everything on one screen. And then, our finance friends wanted 12 different reports with one field on it. It's just, what is their personal preference? And does it make sense to make them that specific thing? Or do they just need to eat the bowl, the pot of chili with everyone else and they won't be that happy? So I found similarities there. Um, and then I I just fell in love with it and just wanted to know more and more and more and more and more about technology, about how these lines of code um, can make incredible differences in our business partners' lives or in our lives, or and it just kind of snowballed from there. It was, yeah.
It's I think it's a wonderful, and I also, well, I have a son who's studying now to become a chef, or is
Mhm.
continuing with some other stuff, but really interested in cooking and helping out and working in restaurants. And indeed, I see a lot of similarities between cooking, and because you have to deal with the certain situation, you do have, in a sense, a tight deadline because you have clients there waiting, and you can't always predict exactly a lot of stuff, but you still need to make sure that everybody who's in your restaurant gets their food what they want.
Yeah.
And you might have a perfect recipe, but then someone like me comes in who's allergic to milk, and then that might change some things, and so there's keep adaptations in many different ways. There's definitely a lot of teamwork in most kitchens
Mhm.
of restaurants, so there is a lot there. The communication can be really dangerous if you don't are not good in the restaurants. I think there's many similarities that we
Yeah.
can talk about.
Yeah, the
So
front house versus the back of house, right? Our product owner is probably the person in the front of the house, making sure the customers are happy, listening to what they want, um, listening to what problems they have. And then, that front of the house and back of the house have to be in lockstep. So,
mm,
product owner with stakeholders, scrum master, developers, testers, you know, anyone on the development team, they have to communicate so well. And that handoff has to be as perfect as possible so that we're getting the people what they want.
I agree there. I agree there. That's it's a nice metaphor that you add to that. So thanks for sharing that. It brings again. It shows also a little bit that your background, and we had many people here on the show who have completely different kind of backgrounds, and I really like to show that and to make that distinction for people, that you shouldn't, or it doesn't mean that you always have to come out of IT or have this or that kind
Mhm.
of background. We have people from all kind of places, and I think that that is really is important in this day and age, that people realize that, in that sense, independent of your background, people can learn a lot of things and can move in different categories. So thanks for sharing that part. Let's move to that next question. If what do you consider your biggest challenge, and why is that a good thing for you?
Who I think my biggest challenge is, would we like them alphabetically or chronologically? There's lots of big challenges. I,
Well, it doesn't have to be the biggest. Sometimes people say, well, that biggest one I don't want to share on the internet, open on the internet. But what is a challenge that you do want to share and want to talk
I've come across this new word, and it's really resonating with me. And it's your energy budget. Just like you budget your finances, you have a finite amount of money, and you have to budget to where everything goes. I I really like that idea, and it resonates with me that I don't budget my energy well. That I will say yes to a lot of things, and um probably as like a people pleaser, or absolutely, or like naive thinking that I can do that, but always wanting um to say yes. And which is what we coach product owners on all the time. We have to say no. And so it may sound a little silly that the biggest thing for me is also one of the biggest things that I coach. But it just shows you how, man, humans are messy little creatures, and it doesn't matter what we know, right? There's a knowing doing gap sometimes, and we know absolutely I need to say no to everything but this. And then that F word, like those feelings creep in, and the feelings of, man, I really want to do this. I really, it looks really fun. It looks good. Or I want to make so and so's day better, or whatever that reason is. Um, it it's a hard thing, to make sure that you look at your energy like you would look at a paycheck. You only have so much energy to go around, and are you spending it where you want to spend it? With your family, with um, professional development, with learning, with philanthropies, whatever buckets, cost you have for your energy bucket. um, is that the right one? And just like holding up a mirror to yourself when you're not splitting stories too, or small enough or big enough, or in a way that's the best for your team. And maybe not doing some of the practices as well, or doing practices in a way that benefits you the most. um, I think I still struggle with that. Where does my energy budget go? um, and I I just also want to be really transparent about it, right? Because as an agile coach, we struggle with this stuff too. And that doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that we're human. And we're trying this stuff out on ourselves sometimes, that we're trying out, with other people we coach. So I think the energy budget thing is my biggest challenge right now. And I actually love the fact that I'm going through this inquiry with the energy budget, because I I think realistically, I'm not sure have who doesn't have this problem. Um, and whether it's life, work life balance, I think is a bit of a misnomer. I think it's more like that work life integration. Um,
about? Yeah, I like to
because
use work-life fusion. Integration feels a
yeah,
similar kind of work. That
yeah,
it's yeah. There is no such thing as the balance, because it's an
yeah,
integration, and sometimes it's a little bit off balance in one direction and another, and yeah, that's I like
yeah.
that. But yeah, so you're talking and you're saying that we have that energy, um that challenge there, and so that second part of that question, why is that a good thing for you? You talked already a little bit as a coach, but could you say some more? What else is there good about that being a challenge for you?
I think you have to be relentless about what's important to you. And I think whenever there's any realization or conversation in life that makes you take a hard look at what are your values, who are you, and what are the mechanics and practice to support those values, I think is such a win because it's really easy to get into just I'm just going to do this and the doing part. Just I'm going to have this client meeting, I'm going to train this class, I'm going to have this, this organization, I'm going to coach them in the way that I've always coached before, and so on and so forth. But when you strip back how we've always done it, or you've stripped back, the adrenaline kick or the feel good kick of saying yes to someone, and we get down to kind of the nitty gritty, it make it makes you have to really ask questions of yourself that you wouldn't want to ask. Recently, for example, I have two 15-year-olds. I only have them, something that comes up for me is I only, have them in my house for another 3 years or so. And so there's something there's something about the time with them being so much more precious, because they'll go to university somewhere in the world, who the heck knows where, um, and start their own life, which I'm incredibly excited about seeing. But what that's done is said, man, this is my market window for my kids, to make sure that I spend all the time that I can with them. And that's really important. And what that may mean is, you know what, I don't do as many on-site coaching visits as I would, or I don't pursue that coaching certification or something else like that. Say no to a client, because I want to make sure that at this point, in time, that the market window is me making memories with my kids for the next 3 years. Um,
Mm,
and
I, I recognize that part. Well, for me, a big reason of doing the whole show here is to keep in contact with agile friends around the world, to make new friends without having to go to conferences. And because I can do it, it's indeed very late, or it will become late by the time this is finished on a Sunday evening. My family might be up to bed, but I will be sleeping in my own bed, and I will be seeing them. And I just saw them before and after, and so yeah, it's this is that for me, that uh, way of doing that fusion, in finding that. So I can definitely recognize a lot of that. And I think, well, I don't know how it's for you, but I see a lot more people thinking much more deeper about that since COVID, because then
Mhm.
we were forced to work from home, and we'll talk some more about remote working. But when you say these things that you just said now, was that also influenced in how you thought about work and everything, about that balance in during these things that happened in 2020?
Yeah, I am absolutely, and I think I have a unique perspective of that because my husband and I actually met in 2020. He lived in New Zealand. I lived in the US. Um, New Zealand closed its borders down for a little bit, so we couldn't really see each other. And and my family in the United States, we took it really seriously. We have my mom has asthma, so she was at a higher risk. My sister
Wow.
and I have a grandma who's 96 this year, and we were, her caregivers. So we had to really, you know, bubble really hard. So it was really my sister's family, my mom and dad, and me and my son. That was our bubble for 2 years almost, and so it was really hard, and Matthew, my husband, and I had to make some pretty tough decisions on. We had it's probably too much information, but like a long distance relationship when we are not exactly sure when we're going to see each other because no one's
Wow.
traveling. Um, it was really difficult. Um, but I think this is one of your, from what I remember, one of your questions, but we had really um, intentional conversations about how to, like, what do we miss from being in the same space, and how can we replicate that as close as possible, um,
Mhm.
to Zoom or whatever. Um, and it was the same thing with my friends and things like that, right? Like we would all get the same cocktail ingredients and we would all make the same cocktail on Zoom or something like that. There's like that ritualistic nature, um, that helped with that connection of human seeing being seen and heard, which I think was absolutely necessary during that time.
Yeah, you're alluding to this question. What have you learned about remote working? And
Yeah.
actually, what I'm hearing, it was not just remote working for you, but it's really remote living or remote, yeah, having relationship remote, because yeah, both
Yeah.
are in a kind of lockdown situations for different kind of, well, different related reasons, but
Mhm.
rules were different in different countries, and you did it also for family members
Yeah.
to make sure that yeah, you could keep your grandmother safe. And I think it's a very good thing also to really think about, okay, how could we create that connection? Because some
Yeah.
people think we can't do it. Well, in a way, you kind of proved it. If you can have a relationship that survives it, because that's, yeah, and indeed, if I'm hearing that, or at
Well,
least
he's my
I'm making
husband
something.
now, so it worked out.
Exactly. So, so it worked out. That's what I wanted to say. I think you're married now, so it kind of worked out. I think it's also very, probably not what you want in the start of a relationship, but at the same time a very good test, because if you can survive these kind of things, you can probably survive a lot of other difficulties in your in relationship. So that is also. But thanks for adding that kind of thing. And yeah, so we moved the order of the questions a little bit, but I thought it felt really logical to add that to that story. Let's move to the next question, and I think with a lot of what you say, there is passion, there is drive. Do you know what drives you? Do you know where that comes from? You talked already a little bit about what you learned from your father, but is there more?
I I mean, the drive for me, the thing that comes first and foremost, my children. Um, how can I make, their start of life, um, as great as possible? And I think that it actually relates back to the way, um, I was brought up and the influences of, my mom, my dad, and my sister. Um, how can I influence my kids like that so that they don't give up after they, run into one roadblock, that they see multiple paths forward, that if they fail, it's a learning experience and not they are a failure. Um, and so being an agile coach just falls so directly into the skills that I have as an agile coach, and what I learned there, I can take, into my home and help my kids just to have something, that they can hold on to. I think that's
Mm,
one. But this the second one that resonates with me is, I I think one of the basic human desires is for people to feel seen and feel heard. And I think when we are in organizations, sometimes that becomes secondary. And I think that if you can make people feel heard and feel seen, that's half the battle. If they believe that what they're saying is important and worthy of being listened to and worthy about of being taken into consideration when thinking about the whole system, I think one we're happier people. 2, I think we make concessions if we feel like we're being considered as part of the system. Um, and 3, I think that's one of the just the basic human needs. I need to feel seen and heard as a human, not as a cog in the wheel. So I think those 2 things, my kids and just to make a space for people to feel seen and heard.
These are, yeah, I think very powerful things. And I really like your message about making people seen. I think it's very crucial. And yeah, as an agile coach, it's incredible how many times that when we just listen to people that they already, yeah, it's not always about giving advice. Sometimes it's indeed about listening to people, having them seen, and then they can come up with their own solutions, and then they just realize, oh, okay, I'm not the only one having that problem. You don't immediately have the solution for me. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. But if we don't have it, just giving the affirmation, I hear you and I'm here, and that might be enough for people to find out some of these things. Um,
I
and yeah, I definitely link the other part, what you say about your children. I think
Mhm.
many parents would recognize that that is a drive that in many different ways, both positive and negative. I think sometimes it
I
might
agree.
not be always the positive version, because sometimes they also drive us crazy. We don't always want that, but
2 15-year-olds, 2 of them. Oh,
yeah, um, yeah.
I what you were saying about making people feel seen and heard, I think that like I've come into being able like I feel like I collect frameworks and methods like shoes. Needless to say, I've got a lot of them, but I think it goes
I
back
wasn't
to
sure if you were talking about the frameworks of the shoes, but I think it's probably both.
both, both. But it it doesn't matter. Having the right answer when when you have a passion for learning, which a, a lot of the greatest agile coaches that I've um, ever met are those people that seek out dissenting opinions and seek out new knowledge and seek out ways that challenge the way that they think. So having that passion for learning and that passion for always seeking, I think is incredibly incredibly powerful. Um, and I think that that drive is really what gets us to understanding that we don't know everything. So the more we know, the less we know kind of thing. And I think passing that on is is also the most important part there. So as smart
Mhm.
as it's like as smart as you think you are, there's always something, over the hill. Like it's climbing to base camp at Mount Everest and then seeing the mountain behind you. And realizing, oh crap, like the more I like I've learned this much, it's nothing. It's absolutely nothing.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
it's just the start, and I would definitely say that 15-year-olds can definitely give you the feeling that you don't know anything, because they question everything that you do, and the rest. So that is also another thing there.
agreed.
Let's move to that next question. What do you consider your biggest achievement so far?
Mm. Um, I think personally, I think being a mother to Liam and Emma, um, hands down, 100%. I think if I'm talking about kind of the feather in my cap, what I have like a lot of pride about, um, is scrum mastering um the merger of financial systems for Whole Foods Market and Amazon in in a way, in an agile way, in standing up for what I believed and what Whole Foods believed to, to a monolith like Amazon. And, keep on pushing, keeping on bringing up what we think was the right thing and really holding to values. Like, it's a cool thing to say that you were on the leadership team of that period. But
Mm,
what I'm really, really proud of is standing up for the values and the principles of Whole Foods Market and being really transparent and fighting for what was necessary for the people that I felt needed to have a voice. And so I think that's probably being able to influence the changes that happened there, is my strength lies solely in my tenacity at that point, but being able to represent and make sure that people felt heard, in a situation like that, I'm really proud of. I'm really proud of the work that I did there.
And I think did I do I remember correctly that you were already at Whole Foods Market before Amazon bought them, so that you were in that whole transition, you were there? Did I
Mhm.
do, is that yeah. So that's I would almost say two different kind of companies in a way before or after the being bought, because Amazon is definitely at a different kind of level scale, I would say. Um,
I
so
think,
yeah, that's a different kind of
yeah.
animal in a way, uh,
I
company.
I think a different scale, I think different ethics, I think different, values. I think, Whole Foods, and it still holds on to some of this to this day, but it is still all about how can we make it best for everyone. One of their principles is a win-win partnership.
Mm,
So basically, how can everyone win? They call employees team members. They there are so many there were so many beautiful things that really helped agility to flourish because it was already in the DNA of the organization. Um, and going against, this, well, it's Amazon, right? Like,
mm,
I remember, walking into Whole Foods after it was announced, and just the look on everyone's face was like, holy crap, what is going to happen? And it went so far into what's in it for them, right? Because everyone thought it, right? Everyone, okay, does that mean I'm going to get fired? First thing on everyone's, does that mean I'm going to enjoy working here? What does that
mm,
mean to me? And so, talking to everyone, I remember that sprint, actually, we canceled it because there was no way that people could focus on, you know, building an API for whatever reason that we didn't know was going to be a reason in a week. So it was leaving that space for people to just be human, not to be like an employee number, but just to say, man, this is really scary, and to listen to them, right? It's those skills that we all pretend that we know how to do, but in reality, the last time we were taught about them was in kindergarten, right? Listening, having respectful conflict and not avoiding it, asking questions and being silent, right? Four simple things that we supposedly learned in kindergarten, but we haven't really practiced. And so, like, just I remember just leaning into my coaching stance. I don't have the answers. This isn't about finding the answers. This is just about people feeling like they have a space to say they're freaking scared, and for that to be okay, and for us to try to figure out ways to lessen that. So what do you need to hear? What do we need HR to clarify? And even just taking that week was so powerful for the entire organization, because it's hard to have quality in the work we do or pay attention to anything when we're scared, right? Money equals security. So we're taking away people's security. And I don't think anybody can do their best work when they're scared of how they're going to pay their mortgage or get food on the table, or any of that stuff. And so just acknowledging it instead of ignoring it, I think is a big reason why that transition went as well as it did. So I commend, all the leaders that supported that idea. It was I've never seen that at another organization in the same way and with the same force and support from leadership.
That is an incredible story, and it's nice to hear some of the insights. I would not say the whole insights, because I think everybody who was there might have different opinions
Yeah.
on some of that happened, which is also very logical.
Mhm.
But I think it's also yeah, a nice achievement to come up with, well, or to have been part of, I would say, to help out that, well, survival of the culture. I'm not sure if it fully survived, but at least you helped out in, okay, how do we deal with merging these two cultures, and
Yeah.
being part of that. That is definitely, and I really like the idea of canceling the sprint. There's yeah, it's it's never good to cancel a sprint, but at the same
Right.
time, when the situation is there, that it sends a very strong message. And I think it also makes it very clear for the people who are there, like, okay, we know that this is a problem, let's deal with it, let's take it on heads on first, let's talk about it, let's see what we can do, and then worry indeed about that API if it still is needed or
Yeah.
not.
If it's still a thing, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that is an important thing. Let's move to that next question. Do you have a personal agility tip to share?
I This is going to be funny, but this is what has helped me the past few months of getting out of this saying yes to everything. Um, Whenever you're going into trying to have this like personal agility journey, it's not going to look like everyone else's, and that's okay. Um,
Mm,
and right, we can insert like the Pomodoro method, the Eisenhower rate. Like there's so many things that we can bring in. But something that resonated with me is um, Coco Chanel, the designer, used to say, "Get dressed, and before you walk out the door, take one accessory off." And which is fun. Like it's a fashion kind of fashion forward thought. But I actually use that with my backlog, because I know I say yes to a lot. I look at my backlog, and before I commit, I take one thing off, because that's the way that works for me. And so, just having accurate thinking about what you can do at the pace that on Friday you're not at 2 p.m. You're not going to like just be brain dead. And that balance looks different for everyone. Some people have so much I don't want to say control, but so much awareness of what they can do. Me, I do too. And this eternal optimist, like unicorn that rides in on a rainbow in my head, thinks that I can always do more. And so I have to put that like catch in. Okay, yep, here's my list. What's the thing I'm taking off? And if I get to it, awesome, right? Like fantastic. But just know thyself. maybe is my trick. No, if you are an eternal optimist, you may have to put in just another method or something to get you to get closer to accurate thinking. Um, then and it looks different for everyone. That's the thing. I think a lot of people think that if their Trello board looks exactly like someone else's, that means they're doing agility. Or if they do the same thing as someone else, and nothing could be farther than the truth. I
Mm.
think,
Yeah,
yeah,
I really I link it also to what you said earlier on about having multiple methods and yeah, seeing what methods work and where they don't work. The same thing could be said in the opposite way. What might not work for me might still work for you. So me telling you don't do this because it doesn't work might also be bad advice. But
yeah,
there is a lot there. Just having the exact same board is
yeah,
probably a bad idea. It might be a good start because it can give you a head start on something,
absolutely.
and then you need to adjust on different kind of things.
Yeah,
So thanks for sharing that.
yeah,
It's I like also the fact that you state that well, some of these things um, I'm not sure how you said it again, but yeah, something triggered me there that you say, okay, the tips. It's not so much about the techniques and everything. It's also looking at okay, what is working at this moment
yeah.
with what we're doing, and having the focus there on seeing what do we need. So that's
Yeah.
yeah.
We use agility in our house. Like that's
Mm.
how I mean my son had a Kanban board before he could read with like pictures on it. Like he's
Wow.
he's in. Um but it's interesting like I refine the kids backlog differently with them. Because they're not a they're not a team. They have separate backlogs and getting those two to work together on anything is um good luck. But Liam um, really focus like really has a specific thing about wanting to understand the problem, not the solution. And Emma wants to actually list down the actions to get to solution. And so even in the same sense, the same family, we have to approach them differently to get a backlog that they're comfortable with,
Mm.
and that they can see clearly what needs to happen to get to whatever their goal is. And those goals are slightly different. Um, and it works for them. Absolutely. So,
That's yeah, that I really like that, and indeed, Kanban boards. You don't need to be able to read, like you say.
yeah,
If you use drawings or if you use icons or whatever, that might indeed help out already people to know about some of that stuff. So that's an extra tip in on top of the tip, I would say. Thanks for sharing that. I want to move to the next question about a book because we already talked a little bit about remote working. So I'm going to well, not skip that question. We already dragged it forward. Let's put it like that. So, what's a book that you have read that you want to talk about?
I have two, so you can pick, and they're very different. So one, I think Lead Without Blame by
Mhm.
Trisha Broderick and Diana Larson. Um, I have like stickies because I think it's one of those books that you can pick up and it has lots of good bits in it. And I love that the focus, like the term learning teams, I think is so powerful because that's what we have to get to.
Mm.
And then one
And
that has
so both of them have been on the show. If you would um, if you would advise this book, what kind of people do you think really need to read that book? Because
I
it's leading. What do you how
oh,
who would you
Lead Without
consider that?
Blame. I actually think it's not just a leadership book either. It's also I've I actually brought this book out yesterday when I was on or Friday, I should say, when I was on a coaching call. And it wasn't anyone in leadership, but it was them discovering how they wanted to be led. Because
Mm,
if we discover how we want to be led, we can start articulating that, right? Humans are linguistic creatures. And I think sometimes when we don't have the language to support it, it's really hard to articulate. So I think what this book does, that I was surprised about, well, not even surprised about, but as a positive side effect, was giving people the language of what they want to be instead of leaders what they want others to be, being able to come up with like, yeah, that's, I want to be, an inclusive collaboration, like resilience factor. Like I want to embody how we can be resilient as a team, or like this inclusivity that they talk about. That's who I want to be. And I think when, just like in coaching, when that person can come to the answer of what they want to be, it's so exciting. And then they can talk to their leaders about how they can be led. What are the goals? And so that commonality of language, I think, is a gift across the board. And I think that what this does is gives the common language of being able to articulate that. Whereas leaders lead, we also need to understand how we want to be led and let people know that. So we're not guessing. So that's what I think about. I have lots of feelings about that book. It's really great.
but thanks for adding it. And yeah, I kind of was hoping that and on this kind of answer, because it also felt for me that this book is not just about leadership or managers or whatever. Because yeah, I think many people, well, for me, leadership is more an action than a position.
Yeah.
And I think that books articulates that very well. So thanks for explaining that even better than I could do. And you had a second book, if I remember correctly.
I do. And this is going to be a funny book. Well, not funny, but it's Legacies. It's about what All Blacks can teach us about leadership. Um, and there's a few things, right? So the World Cup was yesterday. Let's not talk about the results. We don't need to go into that. Um, but it's, if you allow me to pontificate just a bit, I found this book after living in New Zealand. We moved to New Zealand at the beginning of 2022, and my son came to me and asked if he could play rugby. Now I am from Texas, so gridiron is in my blood. Like I grew up in the towns where Friday night, if you weren't at the football game, like you, there was no other choice. You were at the football game or you were in the hospital getting something fixed, because that's the only reason you would miss a football game.
Mm.
So when he came to ask me, my heart, like I was like, oh, this is kind of hard. What is this rugby thing? Um, but he put a PowerPoint together, um, compared head injuries, because that was my big thing. And I was like, okay, like you can do it. Fine. And I remember going to the first game and standing on the sidelines, and I was watching, and I was angry. And I was angry because I was watching and I didn't know how to support the team. I didn't understand the rules of rugby, right? What is this scrum thing? What is a maul? How is a maul a ruck? Like, why are they throwing it backwards? Why do they call it a try when they succeeded? Like all these questions. And I was really upset because I'm standing there watching my son play something that he's actually really good at. And I didn't know how to support him. And
Because
my
you didn't
husband,
know the rules, because you didn't know the words. Basically, it was you. It was not your culture.
yeah. And the thing is, my husband, phenomenal, stood next to me every weekend and explained the rules. This is a penalty. This is this. Um, and I started to realize that that has to be how some of our stakeholders feel in agile transformations. They're
Mm.
sitting on the sidelines. You don't understand the rules because I, as as a transformation entity, I don't even know how to describe it, but we sometimes forget that stakeholders need freaking training too. They need to understand the rules of the game so that they can support the team. And I think we forget that quite often. And it doesn't have to be formal training. I'm not at all trying to, but how can they be supporters when they don't understand the freaking game? And there was something about the embodiment of that that just I was like, whoa, like I can learn something here. So um going to Liam's games, learning about the All Blacks and things like that, I started to. This was a book that came out 10 years ago, but I was like, I will read it again because context. And I live in a
So
country
you
that I
did
have.
read it 10 years ago before
Mm-mm.
the conflict or not? No.
I did not. I
Mm.
did not. 10 years ago, um, if like 10 years ago the scrum I knew about was like from Jeff Sutherland, right? Like
Mm.
it wasn't the actual scrum of rugby. I remember seeing the first time, I was like, oh, that's a scrum, that makes sense, that's um but reading it, I am really lucky to see it in a different screen because there's a few things that really stick out for me here. And when we were talking about, when one of the questions was about remote work, something that really resonated with me in this book came up, and it's about ritualize to actualize to create a culture. And I think with remote work, we're like, oh, we can go from you know our bed to the office in 5 minutes. And so that'll save so much time. That'll get us to work longer. That'll, whatever efficiencies are there. But I think we forget that transition from the office to home is a ritual that we have to have as humans so that we understand that, okay, brain, we can kind of turn this stuff off for now so
Mhm.
that we can focus on something else. And so in the book, they really talk about um, the rituals can make the intangible real. Um, it's an example in business is like I think they said Walmart's Saturday morning meetings, where the company ritualizes knowledge sharing. Um, so they kind of put it in the culture that knowledge sharing is there, right? Rituals, um, stand ups, retrospectives, plannings. Like we've ritualized this so that we can kind of prime our brain to actualize and create a culture of that. Like it's when you see an All Blacks game, you see a haka at the very beginning, and there's something incredibly moving about that ritual. And in no way comparing, Scrum events to that, but I think that what they're saying that moves me is we have to there are rituals we have, whether we call them rituals or not. And with remote work, we can't necessarily figure out the best way of putting those rituals back in. So even if it's so my husband, this is our office, we close the door when we are done. We go outside, walk around, and then come back home, or we walk down to the beach and then come back. But there's a ritual of leaving work where it is, or leaving this meeting where it is, or how can we make those connections? And I think what I really loved about it is the emphasis that rituals are a way to create a culture, um, and a way to see how the culture is going. So that's one of them. But I completely understand that I'm reading it from a deterministic screen of moving to New Zealand, um, and having a son play rugby now. But
But
isn't that
yeah, this is also I really like I want to go back a little bit to what you said earlier on about indeed your stakeholders not knowing some of our cultures.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, doing an agile transformation and leadership that doesn't understand what we're doing, it's always going to give problems at
Yeah.
many different levels. It's yeah, we need all to understand the different rituals, and vice versa. I think teams need to also to understand better the language and the cultures and the rituals that their management is doing, because they're also important at their level. Um, and sometimes we need to look a little bit on what rituals can work at both sides, or which ones can be replaced by other ones. But yeah, we need to understand each other and speak each other's language.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I can I think back through some of the transformations that I would, those teams or those opportunities that you're like, man, if I could do that again for the rest of my life, I'd be one happy girl. And just thinking about what that feeling was, right? Because on paper, pretty similar. But thinking back, it was knowledge was a gift that everyone wanted to give. And I think in an agile transformation, that's what we need. We need to be in the business of giving knowledge at the very beginning. Who wants it? Even if you don't, like, I'm going to try to convince you, and doing it again and again, um, because that's how can we expect people to change, even their actions, if they don't understand why? And we have to change actions in order to change that culture to get to an agility mindset. So we're kind of cutting off our nose to spite our face when we don't educate everyone involved.
Yeah, I recognize that. At the same time, yeah, sometimes the people that hire us, they're like, yeah, you need to help the teams over there, as if we need to fix them and they're okay. I think that this big part of what enterprise coaching is making sure that people at a higher level understand that they
Absolutely.
need to understand some of the cultures and some of these things as well. But I really like it in the book with your example, because indeed when you move from one country to another, you very quickly understand that there are cultures that, even though you understand it at the superficial level, there is a lot there that you don't understand.
Yeah.
um, I think I also had a son who played rugby for a very short time, and I've never understood many of the things that are happening. I had another son who played basketball, which is a sport that I was not familiar with in earlier in my life, and had similar kind of things. And other parents were, yeah, but it's easy. I can explain you in 5 minutes rules. And it's like, no, it's not that easy. If you don't understand, if you don't have a cultural background, there is a lot more. Yes, you can do it in 5 to 10 minutes. You can explain the basics, but if you need to be behind the scoreboard, for example, or if you indeed you want to cheer for things, you need to understand it at a deeper level, or at least I recognize that part for you, that I also, as a person, want to understand it better before I can fully emerge into the game and fully
Yeah.
feel that game.
And as a parent, I wanted to do whatever I could to support Liam. And supporting him, he's a prop, so he's on the front row of the scrum. That support looks a lot different for him than I would have ever thought. So I have to, if I want to support him so he can be the best player, or as a leader, I want to support a team so that they can be the best team, or whatever their goal of the team is. I have to understand so I know what opportunities to bring in, where to remove impediments, where to get people who they need the expertise in. And so even understanding the rules, yes, I enjoy it immensely watching Liam play now. But also now I know that if he's struggling in the scrum, do I need to get him a prop coach? Or what kind of support. And I think there's such a juxtaposition there with leadership and with agility teams as well, that you know you can't always know what's necessary, but being able to ask the questions to get to that answer, you have to have some understanding of the game that they're playing, which is agility, hopefully.
Yeah, I think that's yeah. Not too much to add there. I think that makes total sense. Um, we've been talking already for a while. I'm I really like your answers, and they make me even urge more for that last question. What's the question that you think I should also ask you, and what's the answer?
I am going to come kind of full circle into and reference back what drives me, and it's to get people to feel seen and heard. So I would invite you to consider asking people how they make people feel seen, so that we can get some different tips and tricks into this world, and people can try different things, and just really lean into that human to human connection.
Mm. And
My
what would be your answer to that question?
um my answer is to go in with curiosity and to understand that I don't know how you woke up this morning. I don't know if your teenagers are giving you hell. I don't know if, what's in your inbox, what text messages you've gotten. I just know that you are complete and whole as a human in front of me. And I want you to feel and know that that's how I'm going into this conversation. So I asking about what's happening outside of work and caring. I think that's it. You have to ask questions, but you can't ask questions if you don't care. And if you don't care, people
Mm.
are going to see it. If you're just doing it to make small talk, stop it. Just stop it right now, because people can see through that. Really freaking care about the person in front of you, because they are the key to unlocking the organizational goals, the team goals, all of that. That person in front of you, that whole and complete person in front of you, is the key to unlocking everything else. As long as they feel seen and heard, they can be an advocate for you and you them.
And how do you deal then with people? Because sometimes we encounter people that say, "Well, that's private. I don't want to talk about that," and or
Mhm.
that, yeah. It, it- how do you deal with that?
I I think two ways. If they're if they don't feel like that's what they want to talk about, then listen to them. However, um I always share things in my personal life, or in life in general, to show them that I'm not asking this stuff because I want to use it, or I'm just making small talk, but I genuinely care about a connection here. So I try to embody that before, right? Like showing vulnerability, I think, is the best way to get it, because you're opening a space and you're stepping into it, um, and not expecting them to step into it alone.
Mhm. Yeah, that I really like that answer. They still might not step into it, but I think
Right.
that the fact that are starting, that we are sharing some things, might indeed open up a lot for let's go for that next talk, and seeing that. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and I like that question, because indeed it's, well, for me, I hope with whatever we're talking about, a lot of people see indeed there is that connection that I think many people have already said here. We see that we can create connections from a very big difference distance, from the future even, so we can actually have these kind of conversations, also remote. Um, so, well, the next question that is really for that future then is, who do you think I should also ask next? Do you have some people now that you know how this works? Who do you think are good extra people to invite?
Yeah, absolutely. I have dear friends who I am not sure that they understand the significance that they've had on me moving halfway around the world, entering a new market. You know, kind of have to start from scratch sometimes, and these two are married, and they're actually from Oklahoma and Louisiana, which is right by Texas. So of course, I have a deep affinity towards them. But it's Alex Slowly and Sally Slowly, and they're just these amazing human beings. Alex, however, has this uncanny ability to say things that have been unsaid in ways that just make you kind of feel like a warm blanket. Like there's no judgment, and he's so knowledgeable about the agile community and how to foster that. So Alex Lilly one. Two,
I'm not
yeah,
mistaken that these two people, right?
yes, they are these two people. They're amazing. And then Sally um, is has the ability to say things. She does this like stop bad agile. Like she advocates for it, and she if you follow her on LinkedIn, if you don't follow her, follow her. But she says these things that I think everyone wants to say, but she gives a voice and to start a conversation of crap we need to start. Like just because you have Jira doesn't mean you're agile, or like these
Mm.
very small vignettes, and so articulate in the world of Kanban and coaching in general. And so those two absolutely, I think would be incredibly beneficial. And the third one is one of my fellow Kiwis, Colart Miles, and he has a way of looking at problems, albeit agility, startups, ways of working. But he has this really fascinating terministic screen that he looks through. And so every time I have a conversation with him, I always come out, I didn't see that possibility, or I didn't see that perspective or angle. And it's such a it's so refreshing to talk to him, and just gain perspective. So I don't know
Um,
if I've ever been in a conversation with him that I haven't gained some sort of perspective. That is color. Yes.
Exactly. Well, it's always a little bit a risk to bring on people because, I didn't show the pictures to you earlier on. Alex, I knew, but
Yeah.
the other two people I haven't met, so that's a little bit a risk there. But I really like the way you introduced them and what you share, because that's brings that extra level, of course, these connections. And and I also like the fact that you stressed out how they don't always realize how much impact they had, especially if you move to a different
Mhm.
continent. I've only moved for a temporary time for a little less than a year to Bordeaux, which is still in the same continent. It's not that far away. You moved basically across the world,
Yeah.
different time zones, different everything. So that's really starting all over. And then your network is so crucial, and the people
Mhm.
around you. So if you can stress this, that these people helped out with that, that's really is important. Now, Dallas, it's been a wonderful conversation. If people want to stay in touch with you, if want to contact you, what would be a good way to reach out to you?
LinkedIn, or I can absolutely
And I
share
think
email.
this is
That's
this
perfect.
is LinkedIn. Yeah, I don't like to share that much email addresses because we all know how spam works.
Agreed.
It's a little bit more filtered in LinkedIn, not always. Sometimes that gives other kind of problems, but still there is a little more. Anyway, like I said, it's been a wonderful time. And it's not that many times I have the opportunity to talk with the future. Unfortunately, in this time, I didn't hear any things that would help me win the lotto. But I think at the same time, I've learned so much about you, but also about agility and some other stuff. So really, thank you for your time.
Thank you for doing this. I think like these are the things that, you know, living in New Zealand, I've become aware that sometimes if we're not in the United States or Europe, sometimes we can get left out a bit. And so, what you're doing, I think, is just making sure that that connection can stay no matter where you are, right? Just because North America and Europe has global Scrum gatherings and things like that, it's easier to have networks there. But what you're doing, I think, is making it more of a global network, and I really appreciate and commend you for doing that.
Thank you. It's indeed one of the things I realized. I actually started this with a book version more than 10 years ago, or actually first on a blog and then a book version. And yeah, I think I was halfway through that book when I realized, wait a minute, this is way too Western, too many Americans, too many people from Western Europe. And I tried hard at that time to kind of balance it out. I didn't succeed at that moment, but it was already in my mind like, okay, whatever I'm doing, I need to connect to much different parts of the world.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, I see so much. And for me, it's, I would say that some of the more interesting things are happening outside Europe, outside the US, because of, well, there's new ideas that are coming in
Yeah.
from other parts of the world, and that is actually why it's extra interesting to talk to people from different continents, and to indeed, like you say, make that global connection, because there is so much, yeah. And there's a lot of talk about, is agile that, is agile not that. For me, there is a lot about, okay, this is a whole community that learns about changing, and a little bit like you said, figuring things out on our own. Well, let's connect, and let's not just do it on our own, but let's use each other's brains, and let's
Yeah.
connect. So, well, another big thank you for your time, and well, hopefully, at some point later in our lives, we are able to meet in person and then see if we can take this to the next level.
Agreed. Agreed. I'm down for that.
Okay, thank you very much. Bye
Thank
bye.
you.
Thank
For
you.
watching.
For watching Who's Agile, where the stories of agilists come to life. I hope you liked today's interview. Subscribe if you're not subscribed and want to get to know other agilists.